Hey, ça me fait plaisir d'être ici.
I'm really glad to be here today.
Having me here, I've been meeting many of you in the elevator for the last day, and you've been smiling and being very generous, holding the door for me. And it's really wonderful to be able to be a fly on the wall et de pouvoir écouter ce que vous vous dites entre vous.
Amongst yourselves, so like a fly on the wall, without realizing that I've been listening. So the presentation that you'll be hearing today is based a lot on what I have heard while I was in the elevator at the hotel during the course of the last 48 hours.
As well to listen to the presentations this morning, specifically because I had already put in this first slide here before I left home, and some of the questions in the video really made me think about my childhood, right? So I am a girl who's, yes, I've had the opportunity to work with an amazing array of people at Musique Plus, at Much Music. In fact, some people that I worked with at Musique Plus are doing the technique here today and are some of the people that inspired me to believe in myself, because I didn't always. In fact, I was very much an introvert. Very much a girl who didn't believe in herself. And there's a reason for that. Because as the video earlier said, most people are encouraged by their parents to know that no matter what, you can do it. You can have it all. You can be anything that you want to be. Isn't that what traditionally our parents tell us? Well, the truth is that when I was growing up, that wasn't the case. Not even close. In fact, my father was extremely abusive, to the point where I was locked in rooms and was only let out 3 or 4 days later. So you can imagine what that does to a girl's bladder, as well as to a girl's self-esteem. But in that closet, I would think to myself, one day, things are going to be different. And they're not necessarily going to be different because my father is going to change. They're not necessarily going to be different because society is going to change. They're going to be different because I will be different. Because I will learn to speak to authority. I will grow up to be the kind of person that can stand up in front of giants and speak from the heart. And I think that even though we all come from very, very different backgrounds, different environments, different cultures, when you are put up against the wall and you feel oppressed and you feel like things can't continue the way they've been going, there is nothing that will stop you. So I'm here today to show you some tools. They're free, they're easy to use, and they've helped people all over the world stand up to oppression and find their voice.
So today I'm going to show you certain tools, and these tools are free, and these tools will help you, I certainly hope, to find your digital voice, not just your inner voice, the voice of the union, but your digital voice. Because it's just as easy to speak to one person as it is to speak to 200 persons. For example, if you have 1 or 2 or 3 cameras as you have here today and you upload it on YouTube, for example, on Ustream, the same presentation can have an impact over millions and millions of people. But for the person speaking, like me, it's the same energy.
Because I think it's really important, even though you have translators, I'm going to say it really fast. It takes as much energy for somebody to stand up and speak in front of a group as it does to speak in front of millions of people with the kind of free technology that I'm going to introduce to you today. And many of this technology you're already familiar with because you've got it right in your pocket, in your smartphone. You've got apps that allow you to do a lot of the stuff that we're going to be discussing today. So, communication. La communication.
Communication. I was asked the question, has communication changed?
With the advent of technology. Well, it depends how you look at it. If you're a traditionalist, right, especially if you come from a PR perspective or you represent large organizations, traditionally, right, communication is one way. It's like what I'm doing right now. I'm speaking at you. And actually, that makes me feel very, very uncomfortable. I just want to kind of jump down there and put the mic in your face like I grew up doing at Musique Plus. But in this forum, it might not be appropriate. Hopefully one day it will be. Because I think that you are the experts as much as I'm the expert. So again, the traditional way of communicating is unidirectional, one way. You've got one person, you've got one company, one organization, and you are telling the world the way it is. That kind of reminds me of my dad, right? I was a little girl, he barked down at me, and there was nothing that I could say, nothing that I could do. And so we now live in a world where you can't do that anymore. Because people are going to stand up for themselves. They're going to say, hey, I don't like what you have to say. Or, hey, I think that what you have to say is really, really great, and I want to share that with my friends. So this bi-directional, two-way of communicating is key to anybody who wants to have an impact in the world. Because those of us who are digitally literate, who have that sense of how to use technology to get our messages across, part of that magic is the amplification of our friends and our friends' friends. And then you move on to that third and fourth degree where you're not just influencing society, you have the potential to influence culture at large. And when I think of the Teamsters, I looked it up, because I wasn't sure. I've never been a member of the Teamsters. I looked on your Wikipedia page, and your Wikipedia page talks about Jimmy Hoffa. Well, it turns out I had the biography of Jimmy Hoffa in my library. But I hadn't made the connection. I had no idea. I really did not realize that there was a direct connection there. And so the way that most of us in this bi-directional world of communication think is, oh, I don't know something, I'm going to look it up on Wikipedia. So I encourage you to build that Wikipedia page, to make sure that it reflects the stories that you want told about yourselves today, not just in the past. Who are you today? Here's an opportunity to co-create who you are with your communities at large. And that's an amazing opportunity because you don't have to hire a big PR and branding firm to do that. Each and every one of you has a unique story to tell and to share, and it's that personalization of these stories that actually make it impactful. Why do we remember the story of Jimmy Hoffa? Because it had an impact on society and on culture. And in this bi-directional world of communication, 46% of news, for those of us who haven't watched TV, ironically, I grew up making, producing, creating TV and cross-platform content, and yet I have not owned a television in 10 years. I have not owned a landline telephone in 10 years, since I left Canada, in fact, to go and start working with international clients. So for people like me, this statistic is not surprising. C'est pas surprenant pour moi de voir.
It's not surprising for me to see statistics of 46% of the population which has access to the internet, and they go get their news on the internet, but more specifically on social media. So we rely more on the information that comes from our friends and family than what the Gazette says or Journal de Montréal. We no longer trust these media. Why? Well, because if you're part of my family, if you're part of my union, if you're part of my community, I know you.
I can look you in the eye and I can tell whether you're lying or not. Institutions, you can't really do that anymore, or very rarely, right? And this number, this 46%, is only going to keep rising. Because the largest segment, and I know that you've had some people doing demographics here during the conference. I wonder if they shared this statistic with you. When you look at platforms like Facebook and Twitter, the largest growing segment in North America is the 50-plus segment. When you look at the larger statistics saying, oh yeah, there's more than 1 billion people on Facebook, and isn't that cool? It's a bunch of kids sharing photos. That's true for the rest of the world, but because this is an earlier market, we're early adopters to it vis-a-vis the rest of the world, including developing nations. That means that it's the 50-year-olds that are taking over Facebook and Twitter, right? They're the ones who are sharing the news via social media to their friends and to their family. And in fact, when you look at these numbers, quand vous regardez ces chiffres,
so when you take a look at these numbers, you can see very easily, and I'm going to say this in French. Sorry, I didn't translate this, but I'm going to say this in French. So even when you take a look at the newscast on television, most of us who will have a Facebook or Twitter profile, who use text, who have a smartphone, will still continue to do our searches on our phones, iPads, or our computer while we're watching TV. So perhaps it's not you, perhaps not, but it's certainly a large majority of the North American population who actually are your age. And they're just like you. But it's just that they probably learned it from their kids. And also what's interesting, another thing that was mentioned today, and I find that this is so important,
to be surrounded by people that were older than me. Right? I mentioned earlier that some people that I worked with at Musique Plus are here today doing camera. And it's just mind-blowing to get a chance to see them after all these years. I mean, they're older than me. They taught me everything I know about television. So the geeks, people like me that are extremely digitally literate, and the geezers, people that are a little bit older but have all this experience, that's what mentorship is all about. But it's not just the older mentors that are teaching the young ones. It has to be in both directions. And gentlemen, I'm turning towards you. It must be in both directions, right? We can teach each other. We can work together. That is part of the magic of what we call in business strategic alliances. And when you think about strategic alliances, if you've studied economics a little bit, you realize that it's essentially your friends and your friends of friends in the community. And during the day, they might wear hats like government or boss or, I don't know, person to be recruited or minority to fill in the blanks. But at the end of the day, they're just human beings. They're just people. And if you can figure out who to make these alliances with, and I'm not talking about just the organizations, who within the organization, the specific individuals that will be your buddy, that you can communicate with as a human being, human to human, heart to heart, right? And find those things that you all agree upon and that you can fight for together, you can create what's called a network effect. And the way that the network effect works is pretty simple. So how many people here have a smartphone with them? Levez votre main si vous avez un smartphone.
Raise your hand if you have a smartphone. Most of you have a smartphone. Perfect. All right, so what do we do when we go for lunch with someone? Well, usually what we do is that we put our smartphone on the table, right? There's two of us, we each have our smartphone, and we're here to engage in a conversation, eat, and have a beer. But usually, if we decide to spend money, it's because also we want to have the opportunity to say something to one another and to build something.
Together, they put their smartphones on the table. So great. Jimmy and I are going to build this thing together. Who do we know that can help us? Who are these strategic alliances? Who are our resources? Well, it's not just the people that we have top of mind. It's also all of those contacts and all of those connections in our smartphones, right? And that network effect that I was talking about is us two people, Jimmy and I, right? Plus, let's say 25 people in common. In your case, you've got a minimum of 200 people in common, plus all the other people that you represent as part of the union. But just take that simple number, 2 to the power of those 25 people, that's over 33 million, right? 2 au pouvoir.
2 to the power of 25.
Any math majors out there, it's over 33 million opportunities to build that thing together. But people have to perceive, those 33 million people have to perceive that it's going to be good for everyone, for the common good, not just for those 2 people. Because if it's only good for those 2 people, I don't care, why should I help you? If that's going to be good for all of us, now that's powerful. But the key for those 2 people, for Jimmy and I to be able to build that future together, to co-create that idea together and get those other 25 involved, is listening. We have to be able to not only listen and communicate to each other, we also have to be able to listen and communicate with all of those other people that are helping us accomplish our goal. Now I'm going to show you a tool that a friend of mine built. His name is John Gossier. He's out of the United States, and he decided that he wanted to help the world. He's brilliant. He's a TED Fellow, and he came up with this platform called Ushahidi with a few other friends and engineers. And it's really, really simple. Right now it's being used in relief work. Donc, cette plateforme-là.
So this platform, Ushahidi, is used for the Red Cross and Haiti when they're major event where people don't have access to the internet and perhaps have their phones and are able to send texts so that they can ask for help when they're in, huge emergency situations.
D'envoyer des rapports de ce qui se passe.
So you can send reports of what is happening in your community through mobile phone, email, and the internet. And this is what it looks like.
Participating in it. So you send your updates via text, email, or web, and it automatically organizes it by territory. And if you read it, if you do a little close-up on it, you can see this really is specifically for death, the death toll, and for rapes in specific areas of Africa. But this platform can be repurposed for free to be used for anything. Any kind of oppression in the world, you can get your community to upload via the means that they feel comfortable with, so that you can start organizing and tracking in real time, so that not just your members, but the world can see what's going on. How are you being oppressed? How have we seen this in the past 4, 5, 6 years? Well, we live in amazing times. We live in the world where people that fight for democracy and for their own voice end up winning Nobel Peace Prizes, like for the Arab Spring. We live in a world where kids are being bullied on Facebook, and at the same time, there are sites like Rate My Teacher that exist because some teachers are just not that great. And if the system, quote unquote, isn't going to do anything about it, then I know how to build a website. I can just throw this up in a matter of hours, right? Tell my friends about it on Facebook, on Twitter, on Ushahidi, and boom. There you go. All of a sudden, we've got a platform where millions of people are rating their teachers all over the world. Well, where's Rate My Employer? Well, where's Rate My Union, for that matter? If it doesn't exist, there's a really good chance that it will. So you might as well become the leaders in demonstrating what you can do But again, you need the geeks and you need the geezers to work together to make these things happen. Because if you don't do it, somebody else will. So you want to be able to set the stage, tell your own story, and empower people, and show them how to empower themselves. Look at this, right? And we've all had teachers like this, right? The worst part about this teacher is that he doesn't care about what we think of him. You could be talking about bosses. You could be talking about corporate America. You could be talking about anyone and anything. This platform is open source and free, right? So why not repurpose it for your own? Why not tell your own stories in a way that people that are used to bi-directional communication can relate to?
Another question I was asked is, what is democracy today? What's democracy? Well, I typed democracy and searched Google, and this is what came out. Breaking news.
Organized protests. Except that they're not talking about the protests in Quebec here, they're talking about the protests in Egypt, right, during the Arab Spring. And we're talking about integrated media. Look at this, and I'm sure if you watch the news on television, you see this more and more. Le plus que vous regardez
the more you watch TV, the more you see platforms such as Facebook and Twitter that are mentioned as being the engine of what is happening around the world. Oh yes, don't forget to give us your opinion on Facebook and Twitter. Oh yes, with Twitter, we were able to find out that this or that. So it's no longer television that leads the news, but basically the internet and social media.
Who's afraid of Twitter? Well, if you don't know how to use it, there's a really good chance that you are. These are signs, again, taken from the Arab Spring, right? This is not taken here. This is taken in different parts of the world. And to me, an AK-47 is really scary. A machete is terrifying when it's being wielded at you by somebody who has power and you don't. But have that machete wielded at you and you tweet live about it while a video camera is filming you and you've got film crews all over the world? Who has the power? Nelson Mandela, il l'a compris.
Nelson Mandela understood the power a long time ago. Nelson Mandela was an inspiration throughout my career. And as a human being, when I ask myself certain questions, I wonder what Nelson Mandela would do, because Nelson Mandela understood that if he wanted to change the government of South Africa, he could not only do it by fighting in South Africa, he needed to get the support of the rest of the world in order to change the system that was established in South Africa. And that's what he succeeded in doing. And this is what you have the opportunity of doing by using tools that are free.
Wikipedia page about the Teamsters, I decided not to pull that up for you. Instead, I pulled up the Wikipedia page and I kind of stumbled on really, really quickly
when I did my research on the student strike last year. Who remembers the student strike? Does anyone here remember the student strike? Well, I was in the United States and I heard about it. I went to Europe, I heard about it. It was really a story that, made me think, oh God, I missed it. So I was a little excited when I said that, but yes, it got me.
See all of these people standing against their own perceived oppression. It doesn't matter what side you are on for this. Doesn't matter. The point is that these people believe that they are being oppressed, and they know that they have the tools to be heard. And boy, did they use those tools. Story after story after story about how social media, and as the person that was kind enough to introduce me said, right? It's not just about using social media. It's also about showing up. It's about shaking hands. It's about getting to know people eye to eye, face to face, heart to heart, and amplifying that through social technology. And that is exactly what we saw, right? During la grève d'étudiants de...
And this is what we saw during the strike of 2012. And when you see this, their slogan goes beyond just tuition fees, because it was not only on tuition fees.
For what they believe in, they realize that they have so many other things in common, and so la grève became so much more than what it was started about. And you see this in story after story, not just on Wikipedia, not just in press in Canada or in Quebec, but in press all over the world. Les étudiants à l'avant.
The students here at the Avant-Garde, these are all the Twitter stories.
I really followed this in the Twitter sphere, and what really, really freaked me out is when it says, according to all the experts consulted, the students leading the way, the government is virtually absent from the Twitter sphere and from social networks. How ironic is that, considering here we are on the other side of the border, we've got a gentleman by the name of Barack Obama who was elected twice because of his strength of using social networks and the Twitter sphere. Is Canada and the US that divergent in its thought? Moi, j'ai grandi au Québec.
Oh, I grew up in Quebec and I learned how to use these tools in Quebec. Canada is 80% connected on the internet. 80% of the population is connected, and we include Nunavut in this statistics. And how come the government is absent? And in terms of the social media, what does this mean?
A student movement. It is a movement that has overflowed. Well, guess what, guys? You are part of that movement. This is your movement. This is your time. These are your tools. This is your opportunity. C'est votre bataille.
This is your struggle, and here are the tools that are available to you. These are the tools that you will need to tear down the walls. You want diversity, you want more women, you want more youth. Youth. Well, the youth agree with you.
Power to the people. You represent the people. This is you. So what are you going to do about it? I think that the fact that you were sweet enough to invite me here says a lot about where you have the potential to go with the right kind of leadership and the right kind of membership as well. But it's not just about having a 45-minute talk, a 1-hour talk about the power of social networks and revolution in the world. It's actually about acting on it. And to be able to act on it, as I said earlier, you have to be able to listen. And the communication has to be bidirectional. And when you listen, I'm about to give you some tools, some real tools. For those of you who actually want to do something about it, I really do suggest that you take some notes, because these tools are incredibly powerful and they're being used to change the world right now. Your world. You want to be part of this conversation. To be able to better listen, you're not just listening to what you want to hear. You have to listen to everything that is being said about you and by whom, even if you don't like them, even if you don't like what's being said. Stéphane, somebody from the Teamsters who was sweet enough to friend me on Facebook, showed me that there is definitely that possibility, right, within this group. Instead of going through my agent and a bunch of different intermediaries, Stéphane reached out to me directly on Facebook, straight up, asked me a couple of questions. I got back to him immediately. It was simple, it was easy, it was friendly, and when I finally met him face to face, it felt like I already knew him. That is the power of communication in a bilateral way, in a language that we all understand. Now, this is one of these tools. If you're going to reach out to people on Facebook or Twitter or anywhere else, you want to do so strategically, because you only have so many hours in the day. Vous n'avez pas autant de temps que ça.
You don't have that much time to spend on social media. So this is a tool that is very, very important. It's called Clout. K-L-O-U-T, clout.com.
Rates your level of influence. When you reach out to people, right, you want to be able to reach out to the most influential ones in the digital realm. Not just based on their titles, but based on how influential they are on people that are using social networks. How much impact does what they say have on their friends? That's really, really important. So if you look at this slide really quickly, right, Barack Obama will have a 99 on 100 amount of clout. When he says something, and you saw it in the first election, on the Facebook profiles, you saw most people that believed that he would become the first black, in fact, the first internet president. Instead of having their own picture, they had a picture of Barack Obama. Why? Because he hired Chris Hughes, who's one of the co-founders of Facebook, to help him run his campaign. Right? The geeks and the geezers together will rule the world. Trust me on that one. So clout, he gets 99 on 100, but Justin Bieber gets 91 on 100, which is normal. But who's this guy, Michael Tucci? I've never heard of Michael Tucci. Well, no, Michael Tucci is just a guy who really believes in what he talks about, and so he gets a score of 49. You want to hit people that have scores of 49 or higher. These are the people that you want to focus on in terms of your digital leadership to be able to spread the word. Another really important tool that is absolutely free. It is free. It's an application on Facebook called TouchGraph. And I love it because you've already got a bunch of contacts, you've already been friended and friended people and so on and so forth. Donc avec l'application Touch.
So with the TouchGraph application, what this does is that it'll show you visually first who your friends are, but even more than that, it'll show you how your friends are connected and to whom they're connected, what their affinities are, and geographic regions, where they are.
Donc un outil indispensable.
You absolutely need such a tool. An organization such as yours needs one. It's indispensable. Because obviously I researched Deep Streams Canada. Who's Deep Streams Canada on the social network? I didn't do anything extraordinary, and this is what comes up.
Put it on Facebook. You've got a few likes, you've got a few people talking about it, but there isn't a whole lot of activity. But imagine the power of using a touch graph, the same application I was telling you that's free on Facebook. If all of the Facebook groups that represented the Teamsters mapped their connections to each other, their affinities to each other, the geographical areas, then you would have a much more powerful way of organizing your people, of disseminating information, of getting them to work together and mobilize. Throw in there a Ushahidi, where all of a sudden you can track all their movements and all of their protests and all of the things that you do within the organization and outside of the organization in a visual format that didn't cost you anything. Why wouldn't you do it? It's free. And we're all doing it anyways, including the President of the United States. Right? So here's Barack Obama's touch graph. Who was he connected to before getting elected? Who were the most influential players? What states did they come to? And you can really break it down. You can go really, really granular on a touch graph, find out where people went to school, what kind of music do they listen to, who do they hang out with, what is their latest status update, where are they hanging out tonight and with whom? They say that information is power. All of this power is at the touch of a button, and nobody here is using it. Now, you might not believe me and think that this is important stuff. So here, if it's in the news, it must be true, and it must be important. Donc ça, c'est un article que j'ai...
Here's an article that I found in English and in French. I decided to show you the French version because it's important. It's important that you realize to what extent data mining, information, all of this information that supports all of the social networks is what keeps people informed in the present as well as in the future. This is what gets presidents elected. And this is what makes it that when there's a humanitarian disaster, that it's possible to help them. And when people feel oppressed, they can rise together as a group and say enough. It's examples of all the same thing, the same technology, the same strategy. You don't need to be the president of the United States.
Do this stuff to be a superhero in your own community, because that's what a Teamster is supposed to be, I think. You're supposed to be a hero in your community, or at least that's my perception of it. I'm going to tell you about a study that I discovered when I was writing my book, and it really hit me hard because it was done by UCLA, the University of UCLA, in conjunction with BoardX. And BoardX and UCLA got together and they looked at 6,000 different companies all over the world. Well, no, that's not true. Across North America as well as in Europe. And what they realized is that the most successful companies, and this also applies to brands and to different organizations, the most effective ones, the ones that had the most influence, the ones that had the most power, and the ones that had the most market share, were the ones that succeeded at putting themselves at the center of their network. How do you put yourself at the center of the network? You hire people that are extremely digitally literate. You hire people who know how to use their smartphones, that know how to connect with other people, not just face-to-face, but online. The more connected the employees were, the more the decision makers at the top of the hierarchy had information faster and therefore could make those decisions before their competition, giving them a strategic advantage and a competitive advantage and a higher return on investment. In this case, we're not even talking about a financial investment, we're talking about an investment of your time and energy, and yes, there's a high learning curve to learn how to do all this stuff, but it's worth it, especially if you really want to do what you say that you want to do. If you really, really want to open yourself up to a new generation, to youth, to diversity of culture and of thought, if you want to be relevant and, more importantly, remain relevant, you need to understand this stuff. So I translated it for you really, really quickly. On vous demande d'aller chercher des employés.
We ask you to make sure you have connected employees, people who know how to use the social networks in order to communicate, not just to send out messages, but to communicate in a bidirectional sense. That's what's most important. The more connected people you have, the more swift access to information you'll have, and with which you'll be able to make certain decisions before the competition, which will give you your competitive edge. It's simple. It's very, very simple. And here's how it works. Once you do have that information, once you've connected your touch graphs and you're able to visualize
how all of your people and all of your organizations are connected, right? That's raw data. It becomes information. The information becomes knowledge. The knowledge is what informs your actions. Your actions inform the repercussions, right? So you want to have people that are highly connected that can not only act, but use that exponential math that we were talking about before, that 2 to the power of 25. Well, why not have 10 to the power of 200 to start and see what kind of outcomes you get with that. It's free, but you're going to have to apply your mind. But more importantly, you're going to have to work together to effectuate the change that you're talking about, because this stuff is not going to go away, right? I was shocked when I saw this, but really I shouldn't be. 92% of kids under the age of 2 already have an online profile. They're already, thanks to their parents, their friends, their teachers, their babysitters, having an online profile. They're already digital. The question is, will you be digital? I hope so. Thank you.